Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to cilinixfxcapital. I hope you're all doing great, and welcome to a little bit of a different video. In this video, I wanted to do something which usually I try to, be a little bit careful with, and that's geopolitics and politics and everything around that, right? In this video, I wanted to do a full fundamental analysis on the conflict between Israel and Iran, or at least hopefully not soon. The conflict between Israel and the US and Iran. Wanted to talk a little bit about that without putting my personal values and my personal beliefs into the mix. I don't think that's constructive at all. But just talking about the different possibilities and the different scenarios right here in terms of the development of the conflict and what we should expect from Bitcoin and altcoins in those scenarios, right? And then I will put in my own personal beliefs in what I think is most likely. That's also, what I'm busy with most of the day at this point of time. But that's what I wanted to do. Now, quickly before that, tonight we have the FOMC meeting. I'll be live streaming that, so keep an eye out for the channel for that. That's around, like 8:20 UTC +1, so hopefully you can join me there. But for now, let's get right into it. I'm not trying to make this video too long. First of all, if we take a look at Bitcoin right here, technically on the daily time frame, we are actually still in an uptrend, but I would say, especially given the fundamentals right now, this unrest, but also what I've seen in the last summers, I would say it's more likely that we're going to get into a consolidation, right? And you can already see the early signs of some sort of a consolidation forming right here. I think that's most likely for the summer, and I think it's unlikely in, regardless of what happens in this conflict between Israel and the United States, that structure is going to change. Right, but there are things that can be different in terms of, how far can we drop down. I think we could drop down all the way to 93 and 90,000 and still bounce back into this consolidation, right? I think that's a possibility, but doing that, I don't think is likely over the course of the summer, right? So therefore, it really matters what's going to happen with this conflict. And when we're taking a look at others, by the way, so altcoins, I would say this is relatively similar. This is also consolidating, and it's definitely a bit more bearish than Bitcoin specifically, but I do think ultimately that altcoins will remain stable here. But the possibilities of where will we remain stable and how far can we drop down, that really depends on the conflict. So let's go over the different scenarios in my opinion, right? And obviously, like, these scenarios are not black and white. There's a lot of nuance to every scenario, and there's like, we'll talk about 3 different scenarios. With every scenario, there's like 10 other scenarios that come out of that, right? And obviously, it's a cumulative process. But the first one is, in my opinion, at this point of time, the least likely one. And I do want to check real quick if there have been any updates that I missed. I don't think so. But no, there hasn't been any major update, I'd say. But still, regardless of that, I think the first scenario, which I think is least likely at this point of time, at least today, tomorrow, is de-escalation. All right, if we see some form of de-escalation, and that could be a lot of things, right? That could be between Iran and Israel directly. That could also be between the United States and Iran, mediated by Russia. Who knows, right? But that would be the most bullish case scenario, in which case I think we will just consolidate right here. And then I think we can actually consolidate around 108,000 and 105,000. Do I think that's a reason to break out? No, I think that's unlikely. I think, before all of this happened, I think we already got into some sort of a consolidation, and I think we already lost the lower time frame momentum and uptrend, right? But that would be the best case scenario in terms of staying consolidated. So that's, de-escalation, staying consolidated up here, and then altcoins would do much, much better. And then I think we also have a much, much higher probability to later in the year break out and rally up higher. So that's the first scenario. Personally, I would say at this point of time, this is not most likely. If you listen to the rhetoric and if you listen to the news from the state medias, etc., it seems unlikely. And to be fair, if you look at the latest headlines and the latest things that the United States and Donald Trump have said, seems unlikely. Now, if we get into the second scenario, which I do think is most likely at this point of time, it is an escalation, but short-term US involvement, right? So I think there's two different ways in which it can escalate. The first one is that the US gets involved. I would say at this point of time, this is most likely, but that it's short-term, right? So that they, maybe for a couple of days, maybe for a week, they join the fight, or at least they join the bombing, because, well, we'll get to the third scenario in a moment. I don't think it's most likely they'll put boots on the ground, aka real soldiers, but I do think they can join the war, and it seems most likely that they will. That they will join the bombing, all right, especially of Iran's nuclear facilities. In which case, I don't think that's fully priced in. I do think we'll drop down lower. But then, like I also said at the start of the video, I ultimately do think, especially when we're looking at this level right here, between 101 and 98,000, I do think that will hold. And I think that scenario would be more of a short-term spike, something like this, and then maybe another spike, but then afterwards we will find support, and that we will be able to also bounce back and remain relatively stable, although a little bit lower than with scenario 1. I would say that's most likely, but obviously, and hopefully I said that at the start of this video already as well, I'm in no shape or form a geopolitical expert. I mean, I do keep an eye on it very, very often. I keep track of different sources, but that seems most likely at this point of time. The third scenario would be escalation and then boots on the ground, either Israel or the United States actually entering Iran, or, to be honest, some sort of a long-term involvement of the United States, right? So if it really gets into this war and it becomes longer term, so longer than maybe 1 or 2 weeks, I think that would be bearish as well. I think initially the reaction would be the same, something like this. But I think afterwards we would not be able to bounce back up nicely, and I think it would be more likely to drop down lower and maybe get some stability around 100,000 or 101,000 before any new developments on the conflict. So yeah, obviously, like I said, this is speculation, and there's a lot of nuance to all these scenarios, and different scenarios that could jump out of it. Could also be a mix of things, right? But for now, I would say this is what you need to know in regards to the conflict that's going on right now and what it means for Bitcoin, and therefore, especially if you take a look at the correlation between Bitcoin and altcoins, therefore also for altcoins. That's it for now. Hopefully it helps, but for now, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Hopefully I'll see you in the live stream later, and bye.